basically when you have an internet that's entirely, composable in a permissionless way, the limit is just like imagination, right? It's like what will developers do with all this open data, all these composable sort of APIs that you don't have to ask anyone permission to use. The limit just becomes imagination, and that's why it goes from looking like a toy to being, to changing the world. Is like developers will just come up with really impressive stuff to do with it.
Hey everyone, if you have been listening to Empire, you know that Santi and I are fed up with unaffordable fees and frustrating transaction speeds that make the on-chain experience basically unusable. So the Arbitrum team reached out and they showed us the platform. They showed us what you can do on Arbitrum. Whatever you're doing, you can experience frictionless transactions at lightning speed on Arbitrum. So head over to portal.arbitrum.io and check it out. What's up, everyone? Before we jump into today's episode, I'm excited to share Empire's first ever security partner. Harpie is the best tool to prevent your wallet from theft in real time. Harpie is not just a security solution, they are a peace of mind solution. But don't just take our word for it. Harpie is the only wallet security solution that protected 100% of its users from attacks like the Ledger one in Q4, which was an off-chain signature attack. To learn more about Harpie, click the link in the show notes or visit harpie.io/empire. What's up, everyone? Before we jump into the episode, little plug for Digital Asset Summit coming up in London, March 18th to 20th. Tickets are pacing so far ahead of schedule that we had to decrease the discount code. So instead of Empire 20, it is now Empire 10. Head over to the website, Digital Asset Summit, London, March 18th to 20th. Use code Empire 10 and get 10% off your ticket. See you in London. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Empire. We have Jesse from Variant, Antonio back on the show from Spindle. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. All right, so we are here to talk about, here's like my ideal outline for the show that I want to cover. Frames have taken Twitter by storm, or I guess you could say kind of Farcaster by storm. Frames are this thing on Farcaster. Everyone's talking about them. I want to talk about them, but I think we should do that in the context of Jesse's recent piece and kind of framing of these things called headless marketplaces. So Jesse, I think I'll pick on you to kick us off. Before getting into headless marketplaces, there is a idea that I think that you piggybacked on, which was headless brands. I don't know if you remember this 2019 piece from Sam Hart, and then I think it was Laura and Toby.
The other internet crew. Yeah, I love that piece.
Yes, exactly. So I was like, Jesse, man of culture here. All right. So there was this 2019 piece about headless brands. So what do you mean by, what does headless mean to you here?
Yeah, well, first I should say there's another headless thing or, term of art out there, which is headless CMS, which, developers thought I was talking about that. And, other folks thought I was talking about headless brands. And to be totally honest, when I crafted the term headless marketplace, I wasn't explicitly thinking about either of those two things. I was really just thinking about smart contracts. That was sort of the inspiration for this term, and I'm going to get into that. But I guess I'll start by just sort of offering the definition, which I gave for headless marketplace, which is basically a market that leverages global on-chain identity, money, and data while distributing the market locally wherever a user's wallet already is. And I'm reading this from a tweet that I posted. I kind of was just thinking on the fly. And at the time that I tweeted this, Frames hadn't launched yet, and I actually wasn't thinking about Farcaster. I was thinking about Telegram bots. And how one thing we've been seeing is there's these bots that you can use on Telegram that give you a wallet. And through that wallet, you can interact with any smart contract on chain. You can swap on Uniswap or on any DEX on Solana. And so I was just sort of mulling over the fact that in your Telegram group chat, you can access this global market of on-chain liquidity with your local identity and all the data that you have on device and so on, and never visit a third-party application to do that. And this has been a thing in crypto for a while. But I think the key difference now is we're starting to see apps come to users where they already are. And those apps are hitting critical mass in terms of distribution. Telegram's got 100 million plus users. And now we're starting to see Farcaster, hit an inflection point in terms of its daily active users. So that's why I'm, excited about this idea. It's sort of an old idea that's new again. And as I published it, I was thinking, the people who were around for the Web 2 version of this, they're gonna read this post and they're gonna be like, yeah, duh, like this, this idea has been around for decades, right? So maybe that's a good segue for Antonio. I don't know.
Well, before we jump into that, okay, so a headless marketplace is this market that leverages on-chain identity, and you're basically money and data and distributes. I think the keyword here is locally. So instead of going to the marketplace, you're going to actually where the user is and where they want to spend time. How is this different than what the world looks like today outside of crypto?
Well, yeah, today, like most marketplaces are destinations. Like you have to go to a website, you got to install an app or something like that. And when you do that, you have to sign up for a new account. You have to put in profile data. You have to put in your credit card. So there's all this friction basically to participating in a marketplace. You got to go there and put in all this stuff. And with headless marketplaces, the marketplace comes to you. And I think that the key difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is when the marketplace comes to you, it's coming to your wallet. And what's in your wallet is an identity, money, and profile data that's already there. It's all pre-populated. Your entire on-chain history is there. The assets in your wallet are there. And so the friction to participating in a new market is basically zero, right? Like you don't have to go to this destination and put all the data. It's all it comes to you and it's pre-populated. So that is, I think, why frames are, well, we're going to get to frames, but that's why headless marketplaces, I think, are so exciting in crypto is that, on the one hand, it reduces the friction for developers to bootstrapping liquidity and getting new participants to jump into a new market. And from the perspective of users, it's just a better experience because you don't have to jump through all these hoops.
What's the difference between so traditional marketplace world looks like this. You go to a website, whether it's Airbnb or Charles Schwab or whatever it is, you sign up for a username, put in your password, put in your address, credit card, all that kind of stuff. And that's the destination. The marketplace is the destination. And what you're envisioning is you're saying basically, instead of thinking about a marketplace as an app, you're thinking about a marketplace as a network that can be embedded anywhere else, that can basically be embedded. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and folks who are deep in crypto will maybe know exactly what I'm talking about here. If you go and open your MetaMask or Phantom wallets, in those wallets, one of the key functions is the ability to swap, and so there's a marketplace embedded in your wallet. What's happening on the back end is those wallets are taking your order and they're going routing it on chain, or they're routing it somewhere, but they're bringing the liquidity to you, right? So that liquidity can be permissionlessly accessed by anyone. So that's probably the most primitive example of a headless marketplace. It's the swap function in your wallet. But I think you can extend this idea really to any type of marketplace that is on chain, and any type of sort of user interface that has a wallet embedded in it.
Would it be fair to say that Uniswap was the first headless marketplace?
Yeah, maybe not the first, but probably the most well-known.
Major with main. Okay.
Right. The most well-known and the most widely used headless marketplace, I think, is Uniswap, right? Because it is the smart contract, all the liquidity is on chain, and then there's lots of different front ends that have integrated it, and brought the market liquidity to wherever that interface's users are.
Why is this such a big unlock? So let's maybe pick. So the three of us on this call understand maybe the unlock, but let's say I'm maybe not as crypto native, and maybe I don't play as much in crypto world. I'm like, look, marketplaces, I don't know. I kind of like going to Airbnb.com. They got a nice UI for me, and it works well. Or like, I trade my stocks on TD Ameritrade, and it's all good for me. I log into my TD Ameritrade account. Like, what is the unlock here and like the 10x better user experience?
Well, I think you could approach answering this again from the developer perspective and then from the end user perspective. And I think for developers, it's a huge unlock because it's a new distribution channel. And one of the hardest problems anyone building a startup faces is, how do I get people to care about this thing or find out about it and play around with it? And with headless marketplaces, if there are destinations where you can ship your marketplace to the user where they are, that means you have a new distribution channel to go and acquire new users. And that's huge, right? I think Antonio will be able to speak to this, but when Facebook kind of had open APIs and allowed users to, or developers to build on top of the platform, it was a huge boon for a lot of projects that did that, including Spotify and others, right? They got massive distribution through this channel. So that's the developer side of it. I think on the user side, it's the fact that you can have fundamentally better user experiences, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, when the market comes to you, and it's tightly coupled to your social feed. So that's unique to Farcaster and Telegram, where the marketplace is happening in a social setting, in your group chat, in your social feed. This allows for new kinds of marketplaces that are kind of social first. And we haven't seen a ton of innovation in social over the last decade. There's these kind of like dominant platforms, that don't have a really sort of, I guess, fast moving feature set. And so, better and new user experiences are going to get opened up for end users.
Can I riff on that for a second?
Yeah.
Help answer the question a little bit. Like, the cool thing that this enables is what is an embedded inline experience, which is really weird in Web3, right? Like, just to speak like a marketer for a second, in Web2, I saw a thing in my social feed or somewhere. I click on it. I go to the landing page. I have to sign up for the thing. I have to enter a payment credential. I go to the experience, and then there's a confirmation page, right? And like my company, Spindle, like or billion-dollar companies like Amplitude, Mixpanel exist just to sit there and document that funnel. But what if we just compress that such that a friend of mine shared, "Hey, I'm really vibing to X piece of music," and then there's actually like a frame with like a Spotify with like a play button, and I can actually do it right in there. Or you cited the example of like, how is this different than Schwab? I'm reading a piece about how Facebook jumped 18% today in the market, and there's actually a widget that says buy 100 shares of Facebook, and it just works, right? Like right. You could enable things with this that like don't exist in Web 2. And as proof of lack of existence, think of what Amazon would pay for a one-click ad that they could show you. Like, you abandon the thing in the shopping cart, you go back to the New York Times, and like one-click purchase. It doesn't exist because you can't enable it. There's no way to really do it. But you can natively do it in Web3 because, as Jesse said, all the identity, the money side, the identity, the login has been kind of outsourced, so to speak, to this consensus mechanism that everyone can just have access to. And it's permissionless, right? Like getting to the Facebook thing, and at some point we probably want to get into that story. A lot of the reason why Spotify didn't invest in that relationship is because they understood that at the end of the day, Facebook held all the cards. And so, it was very difficult for them to build very Facebook native experiences because it wasn't this permissionless sort of trustless environment. Should I go into the Facebook flashback?
Well, I'm gonna let me just share one story for for people who haven't been following like Headless Marketplaces and didn't read Jesse's post yet and haven't been following Frames and Farcaster. The way that I tried to explain it to a friend the other night over dinner is inside of your. I actually think Instagram has done a good job of this. Is previously you had Instagram, like in Instagram, if you saw like I don't know, a t-shirt that you really liked, you had to leave and then go to like Shopbop or something. And Instagram actually has embedded that Shopbop is a marketplace, and like these clothing stores are marketplaces for clothes. And now inside of Instagram, you can basically do that native shopping inside of Instagram, and you never have to leave Instagram. And imagine a world with, I think the vision for Headless Marketplaces is, okay, well, you can kind of do that for shopping inside of Instagram. Imagine every single place where you spend time. If every marketplace that you ever wanted to buy anything on could be embedded inside of that place where you spend time. Is that a fair way to frame this?
Totally. Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, and think about, just to be a hard-nosed marketer for a second, think what the conversion rate must be on that unit, right, to buy the thing. It's way better than jumping through 5 hoops. And it also increases time on site on the original publisher site. I hate to sound like an MBA, but it's kind of a win-win in the sense that you're still stuck inside Farcaster or Instagram. On the same time, you're actually converting, like you are generating revenue for the outside partner, right?
And for the user, right? It's just easier, right? So it's just like it's a win-win-win for everyone,
right?
Win-win-win. The
3 wins,
the all coveted. Yeah. Antonio, take us into Facebook. The year is 2011. Take us in here.
Right. So I had this whole like Web 2 boomer flashback thing when I realized that the Frames implementation was using a thing called Open Graph, which, for those younger than 30 probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But back in 2011, I was like a mid-level PM at Facebook on the ads team. There were 6 PMs on the ads team. The ads team was kind of a ghetto, kind of isolated from the main product org. We're trying to, the ad system didn't work basically. Monetization was terrible given how much usage there was. And suddenly, out of the blue, Zuck, the platform team, the product team, people, way more important than the ads team at Facebook said, we're going to do this thing called platform and open graph. What was the point of that? So again, think back, the like button, right? Like this little button with like the little thumbs up was all over the web. So you would read a thing on the Wall Street Journal, like it, and it might show up in your feed. The idea, which is kind of a good one, was, well, why don't you expand the vocabulary of verbs to, watched, read, engaged with, whatever, like all the verbs, right, that one does living your life online. And the cool thing would be to have, you've got the social, like the web was being made social, right? I was expecting, Web 1 wasn't social. Like you'd go read a blog post and maybe a buddy commented on the thing in the comments, but there's no real social network embedded in the web, right? So, and then at the same time, you had these kind of siloed media experiences, like Jesse mentioned, Spotify, Netflix, the Washington Post reader. A lot of media was coming online in a very real way. You were not going to movie theater, you're watching things on Netflix. So why not combine the two in an interesting way? Because some of these things are social. Listening to music is very social, actually, right? Or engaging with a piece of content or commenting on a political opinion is very social or antisocial. But either way, you're engaging with it with other people. So you have this thing called Open Graph. And what it amounted to is basically the frames implementation, just to get technical for a second. You've got these meta tags on top of the page that say, OG, literally OG, right? Open Graph, like listen, read, this is the piece of content, left arrow. It was a way of kind of communicating back to Facebook or whoever the main publisher where this thing was going to be embedded in, that like, hey, these are the details of my experience, right? And so why didn't it work? It was like a massive flop, by the way. It was like a disaster. The ads team also built a bunch of ad stuff on top of it called Sponsored Stories, whereby you'd be able to boost the edges that Spotify spun off. So like the idea being that some content producer would boost the edges of their, none of it worked. And why didn't it work? It wasn't this engrossing experience that Jesse was describing, right? Like it wasn't the case that somebody was vibing to a thing in your Facebook feed and then there was like a play button and you could join them listening. It wasn't an immersive experience. It wasn't the fact that someone published a thing about why Apple was a good investment and suddenly I could engage with it. It was still clicking away to go to this other app. And then maybe you saw, your friends are also using Spotify, but it wasn't a very enmeshed experience. And it wasn't, permissionless, to use the Web3 lingo. Like it was all API calls at the end of the day to Facebook, and no one really trusted Facebook to like curate this thing. Also, it was spammy. Users didn't like,
right.
seeing the fact that I had listened to the same song 10 times in a row. I remember somebody snarkily replied, "We get it, Antonio. You like cake. Stop listening to it," right? Because it would post all the edges. And then, of course, Facebook saw the growth and thought it was impacting negatively growth, so they started downranking the Open Graph edges, and then all these companies basically got a little screwed. They had invested in this Facebook relationship.
Sorry, I followed that until then. Why was it hurting them?
It was annoying. It's funny. There used to be the main feed and this thing called ticker on the right that was literally all the Open Graph edges, and it was literally just what everyone was doing in the world. But it was terrible. It was like, imagine Venmo times 100x. Like literally every little petty thing that people were doing on the outside web, your entire social network, you'd see it. Like at some point, it's overwhelming. You don't want to really engage with it.
It was super noisy.
Okay,
it was super noisy, and
people weren't just doing on Facebook, but anything. Antonio bought a movie pass on Fandango. Okay, boom, comes up.
Right, and yeah, it just didn't work. But and then again, what also didn't work is what is working for Frames. And I'm going to sound like a Farcaster shell for a second, but just to get to the Frames thing, Frames is almost literally like an iframe in a way. But again, the identity and the payment is such that I can transact with the experience inside the frame, which, to be clear, is not a Farcaster experience, very directly. And rumors are we're going to have real on-chain transactions soon through Frames, which I imagine they're going to have to enable. And it's just way more interesting. We've figured out a way to run app Y inside app X in a seamless, permissionless way where the user can just engage and do the thing. And again, like Jesse was saying, this is very Web3 native. Web3 people, like in a Telegram bot, I don't know if people have the experience, you get a bot message and you start transacting on the DeFi exchange through your like messaging app, right? And it's just this very embedded native experience that I think is a very Web3 native thing that, again, is almost impossible to engineer in Web 2, which is why people are freaking out about it, because it's actually quite interesting and engaging.
I gotta shout out. So Mark Andreessen started a company that like he's not well known for, which was Ning, which was a social networking company, and he has this blog post that I can't think of the name of it right now, where he basically describes sort of what Antonio, the description Antonio just gave of Frames, where you build app X inside of app Y. Like that was the vision for Ning, as I understand it. And I think it was trying to sort of improve on early iterations of this idea. The blog post I'm thinking of basically describes Web3, but was written in 2009 or something like that. Antonio, do you know the one I'm talking about? I'll have to find it. I'll have to find it after the show. But anyway, Mark's been thinking about this idea for a very long time. And I remember when I first read this post in question, probably 2017 or 2018, I immediately thought this is exactly what Ethereum enables. And that, I think, fast forward now, 2024, we're finally starting to see it happen. And like the reason people seem so excited, developers in particular, is that composability is sort of what we're talking about. Composability of one app inside of another, and that composability is something developers have been really excited about in crypto for a long time, myself included. Right, like the fact that I can take smart contract A and compose it with smart contract B, and I don't have to ask anyone permission to do that. I can just put the two together. That's been really exciting for developers. But now what we have is composability for end users, right? Which is in this front end experience like Warpcast, I can start using some third party app, and under the hood, we're connecting all the smart contracts. But at the user interface level, we're starting to have seamless integrated experiences, and that's what Facebook never really got to in the first iteration. It was a one-way door. They were kicking out activity feeds that were kind of noisy, and then you couldn't do anything with them. You had to go out and leave the site. So just that's where it kind of hit a wall, and Web3 potentially does not.
It's funny. This Frames is coming at an interesting time with actually Chris Dixon's book being released as well,
totally.
Which harkens back to kind of describes this. It's a good book. People should read it if they haven't read it already. It's what Web 1 looked like, very open. Web 2 also relatively open at the beginning. Then Web 2 starts to get clamped down, and now we've ended up where we are today, right? Facebook, Amazon, Google, etc. basically control 95+% of the Western internet. So maybe Antonio, take us back to 2005 energy, like 2008 energy, whatever it may be, like Web 2.0, Ajax. Open, I don't know if you were doing that stuff in 2005, whenever it was, the open web energy. Like what did this look like?
In 2005, I was a grad student at Berkeley, and the most stressful decision in my life was what pastry to order at cheese board in the morning. Those were the days of utopia. I wasn't worried too much about tech at the time. But I can definitely remember the time more like 2008 or 9, where I'm literally in South Park in Soma in San Francisco, by the way. And like Twitter was invented like 100 yards that way. And literally every company, GitHub is over that way. Like every company that mattered in consumer web was within 5 blocks of where I'm sitting right now. And it was super exciting, right? Like you'd watch, you'd see Brian Chesky of Airbnb walk on the street. All the VCs were in the blue bowl across the street. The feeling that, and I moved here from New York, right? As an urban comment, the feeling that you were at the center of something really big. Like it was pretty clear that like all this stuff was going to change everything. And a lot in tech is like super shilly, and crypto in particular. Oh, we're going to change the world. But then I lived in Barcelona for a while after Facebook, and it's like all of downtown Barcelona's Airbnb hotel, basically, right? Like literally, which isn't great for the city, by the way. But it's, or you go to Uber and there's riots over the Uber drivers who are obviously running outside of the taxi paradigm. It's like, there were downstream effects, not always positive, by the way, of tech. And it was just like a super exciting thing. The world was your life was getting intermediated by this. People forget that. Like, I remember I bought the first iPhone. I guess it came out in 2007. And by the way, I haven't actually tried the Vision Pro yet. One of the guys in the office bought one. But like the first iPhone actually wasn't that exciting, and actually wasn't better than my BlackBerry. But eventually it did get there, right? After a couple of years, it was like, oh, wow, this is like, the little blue dot on the map was like life-changing, right? Like we didn't have blue dots on maps. So yeah, it feels in that way, there's a natural gushing kind of excitement about it. And again, it's like, oh wait, you can wire together all these things you couldn't wire together before, right? It's kind of like when the App Store launched, right? The first iPhone didn't have apps, by the way, or not like third-party apps. But then once that launched, it's like everything just went whoosh, right? So
it feels like this energy basically it was a whoosh of energy and a ton of, you talk about this area in San Francisco and everyone's building all this stuff. And it feels like there was a moment in time when, whether it's Open Graph or Twitter rescinding a lot of the API access, all of this, basically, all these companies had raised a boatload of venture money, and they're all composable with each other. Everyone was building on them. Then they said, oh crap, we got to go make a bunch of money, get our valuation higher. And they just, in one fell swoop, just clamped down and kind of shut off this open web, shut off the composability. And that is what kind of turned into the internet as we know it today. And when I think of Jesse's post with Headless Marketplaces, and I think of what Farcaster is doing with Frames, this is a return to that internet. Jesse, would you say that's a fair framing of this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's the hope, right? Is that, and I think it's more broadly. This is not just Frames, but crypto more broadly is a hope of returning to this more open, permissionless, composable internet. And you mentioned Chris's book, like that's what it's all about. Right? That's he's making the case for crypto as this return to the open internet. And I think that's, that he's doing it in part because, people outside of crypto have this very negative perception that it's all speculation and it's all casino games. But when you start to see things like Frames and Farcaster, give end users this visceral experience of the permissionless, composable, underlying technology, I think that, that's really exciting because it gives, it puts a head on what, what Chris is describing in this book in a very real way. I found the Mark Andreessen blog post. It's actually called the 3 types of platforms you meet on the internet. And it's from 2007. And he describes 3 different types of platforms. Level 1 platforms, apps run elsewhere and call into the platform via web services API to draw on data and services. Okay, so that's basically what Facebook was doing, right? It's like the apps run elsewhere. They call into, log in with Facebook, and you get some data through the API. There it is. So, and then level 2 platforms, the apps run elsewhere, but inject functionality into the platform via plugin API. And I think that's, that would be like the very limited functionality where it's like, it's what you're describing on Instagram, right? Like, the app runs elsewhere, but you can press the buy now button for the t-shirt on Instagram. And then the level 3 platform, and this is where, when I read this for the first time, I thought, man, this is maybe this is crypto. Mark was describing, blockchains, but in 2007, before any blockchain existed. In a level 3 platform, an app runs inside the platform itself. The platform provides the runtime environment within which the app's code runs, right? So that's a blockchain, right? That, Ethereum, Solana are running the code. And it actually, I think the synthesis of this is these level 3 platforms, blockchains, they actually enable the full-throated level 2 platforms that he was describing, where, the apps can run elsewhere, but inject functionality into a front end. And instead of it being through an API, it's actually through the level 3 platform, the underlying blockchain.
What enables this, Jesse? Why is crypto uniquely positioned to do this? Is it about this transaction log? Is it about your identity on chain? Like what is unlocking this?
Yeah, it's kind of, in short, it's the thing that blockchains uniquely offer to the world, which is they offer this permissionless computing platform, on top of which users own their identity through which is in the form of a wallet. They own their data, which is associated with that wallet and is open for anyone to reuse, and they own their money. So developers can deploy any application onto these blockchains. Chris Dixon likes to call them computers, and I think that's a very apt metaphor for them. They are, blockchains are computers, and they run software, and then the users interact with them from the edges of the network, and they own their identity, money, and data. And so the result is you can deploy applications, anyone can compose them into new experiences, and then you can bring those applications to the users wherever they are and access those users' identity, money, data, and do all this without asking anyone for permission. That's the big promise of blockchains, and it's, I think, what we're seeing with Frames. Does that make sense, or any questions there?
No. It makes sense to me. Take us deeper into Frames. So maybe I don't know if this is a question for Jesse or for Antonio. What is Farcaster? I think a lot of people think of it as an app. It's more of a protocol. And then what happened this week with Frames?
Sure, I can take it. It's a point of order. I guess you would use it for those interested. You'd go to warpcast.com to actually use it. So Farcaster is the protocol, which is the underlying layer. Again, the protocol sort of app distinction. And Warpcast is the actual app. Again, it's the analogy everyone cites is like email. There's the SMT protocol, and then there's Gmail that you use on top of it. So again, it really just to hit. I was going to show Chris's book because I have a copy of it somewhere. But like Chris's whole thing is how this, the protocol. It's going back to Web 1 in a way. It's actually a piece of boomer nostalgia. Oh, there we go. Yeah,
I'll show it for him.
I've even got a baseball cap. They sent me a baseball cap for it. But yeah, so Farcaster is the underlying protocol, a lot of which, frankly, is not on chain. Actually, your identity is on chain, but actually the messages are not. They're actually in these centralized hubs, and we're running one at Spindle actually because we're doing some analytics over it and stuff. But the idea is that anybody can skin an app on top of it, right? So which frankly solves a lot of the problems that are inherent in social networks, like content moderation, pornography or bad content, spammy bots, like all those problems are in some sense solved at the app layer, not at the protocol layer. So you can post all you want, but we're already seeing it, by the way, in WordPress. People are starting to, dumb reply guy comments, and Dan's like not banhammer, but like downranked in the feed, right? So the app just says, look, yeah, you can use another app that gets you all the crappy shit if you want to see it, but at least on WordCast, which is the biggest app that's being used on Farcaster, those replies will not be seen there. And so there are moderation tools, to be clear. It's not a free for all. I started a channel on Farcaster. You can use what are called warps, which are kind of an off-chain point system currency, and start a channel. I am the admin of that channel. If anyone gets out of hand, I boot them, I downrank their stuff, right? So there is accountability. It's not a free for all. It's actually way more polite, at least now, than Twitter. And yeah, the frames thing, yeah, again, looks like an iframe, if you know what that means. Basically a square that's exposed to another developer. You literally just share a link to a site that has the appropriate open graph tags on it. You don't even see it, but they're kind of embedded in the site. And then that gives you functionality. So somebody, as an example, I did in my post, somebody ran a Doom server inside. It wasn't a great experience. It's a little slow trying to play Doom, streaming through a window. But the idea is they had like left, right, forward, and shoot buttons in the OG tags. And so those buttons appeared in the actual embed. And then the server was streaming to you at a kind of reduced frame rate, the actual Doom experience. So you could actually see Doom inside Farcaster, which is kind of it's like a Reddit joke, right? Like, oh, does it run Doom? And so like, yes. And the engineer who did it, Cassie, has this hilarious blog post describing how she actually managed to get Doom running inside frames. So that's the idea. It is it's what Facebook couldn't enable, going back to the open graph conversation. Like, here's a little portal to another app in which you're kind of auto logged in because you have an underlying, you can associate a wallet to your Farcaster experience. So you have an FID, which is like your Facebook ID, right? Like just your user ID, but then you have an associated wallet, and that wallet is the identity. And so everyone, again, Web3 is about getting everyone to agree on common protocols and standards in a world in which it's become these fiefdoms of social networks. It's like, no, we all agree that Ethereum or Optimism or whatever chain you're on, that is the identity system. And if you don't like it, well, sorry, you're just not you don't get to play in this pond, right? And so everyone agrees that Ethereum address is you. And so they can do things like, reveal to mint, someone sends you the mint and you actually receive it inside your wallet and you get it because Farcaster knows what your wallet is. I'm not sure how they're going to implement the transaction, but I'm sure you're going to be able to do on-chain transactions through frames at some point. And what that means is, yeah, potentially, somebody's sharing a piece about, I don't know, some token that's doing well, and you might actually have a trading widget right there with your favorite marketplace that says, hey, click right here to transact. And again, the experience we said of like, hey, can I go buy, Facebook stock if I'm reading a story about Facebook? No, like that'll never exist in Web 2. It will never be implemented with the existing Web 2 stack. And Web 3, it's actually not that hard to do. And so right. That's the frames experience. And again, it's gonna get more exciting, right? Like literally just today, Dan launched video in Farcaster, right? So imagine, can you have video in frames eventually? Like literally every app that you engage with on the internet, can you have it embedded in another experience, in a social experience with other people? That's the exciting thing, right? That's why, again, it is the ultimate open graph vision, or the vision of Mark. I hadn't even read Mark's post that, again, was kind of impossible to engineer before, but now it's possible.
Yeah, and just want to add one quick thing. I think that was an excellent summary of the protocol. And the thing that is critical to understand, I really want to tease out is, Web 2 tried to do this, and ultimately maybe there's some world where Facebook could have gotten there, right? Like where they could have really enabled a seamless two-way API between like Spotify and Facebook, and you could have listened to your friend's playlist right on Facebook. Maybe they could have gotten there, but why? One of the key reasons that they didn't get there is the lack of trust between those two companies, right? Because Spotify really had to trust that Facebook wasn't going to screw them, and they didn't, and for good reason, because Facebook did end up screwing them, right? And so here, the reason this is so exciting, it's an old idea that's new again, and actually can be realized, is that the trust assumptions are eliminated, right? And that's because these applications that are composing together are on top of blockchains. The users own their identity, the users own their data, the platform doesn't, right? So you don't have to assume trust in the third party, at least, and that's the theory. In practice, everyone's using Warpcast to access frames, right? Which Warpcast is a for-profit company built on top of the Farcaster protocol, and so in order for this to be fully true, I think you have to have some you have to have multiple clients. You have to have Warpcast sort of honoring the protocol, but you're still ultimately subject to the rules of Warpcast in the Warpcast client. But critically, the frames interop between apps is part of the protocol, right? So the trust assumptions are gone there.
So Frames feels like this neat little playful thing kind of right now. But I think there's I saw you can order Girl Scout cookies in someone's frame, and it's kind of this, it's a toy. It's like what Antonio was talking about when the iPhone came out. It's like, it's a nice little toy. Okay, cool. It can like map me somewhere. Like, okay, that's cool, whatever. But Packy McCormick has a good piece on this on Frames in his Not Boring newsletter, and he said, look, it's this nice little tool, right? Like little playful thing right now, but this could be the first domino to fall towards toppling Twitter, killing Apple's App Store monopoly, or creating something entirely unique. So paint that vision for us. Like what could this become?
Well, I mean, I guess the first thing I'll say is like, I kind of look at Frames and all the excitement around it as, this like, lightning in a bottle moment for Web3 social, right? Like we really, Web3 social has been something people have been talking about for a long time. But this is the first time you've seen a social app in the crypto space get, up into the right daily active user count and that are retaining. People are staying engaged here. And it's not because of an airdrop or something like that. It's because of some technical innovation. So, whenever I think you see these, Antonio mentioned, the blue dot, you saw the blue dot on GPS, like that was like an aha moment. I feel like this is an aha moment for a lot of developers in the crypto space about what's possible, what kind of new experiences, can be enabled in Web3 social. And so I hope certainly that this is the first of many more moments of people building, compelling new social experiences in the crypto space. And so Farcaster is today the dominant social protocol, but maybe Workcast is a dominant client. Maybe we'll see more clients. Maybe we'll see more social protocols, maybe, for different media types, for example. And so, coming back to your question, like, how does this get beyond the toy into how does this change the world? Well, it may just be that this is the thing that is the magnet for, entrepreneurs to come in and start building Web3 social, because there's this sort of playbook that's now clear on how to, how to do it, how to, get distribution and so on. So that's a very high level answer to it, but I'll park it there.
All right, I mentioned them in the pre-roll. Now I'm going to bring them up again. It's Arbitrum. Santi and I are really fed up with these high fees, and we're really excited to have teamed up with Arbitrum for the next couple of months on Empire. As the leading Ethereum scaling solution, Arbitrum now powers hundreds of decentralized apps across DeFi, perps, NFTs, gaming, and a whole lot more. The team has showed us everything in the ecosystem, both now and what's to come, and we're really, really excited about it. Arbitrum allows both daily users and developers to interact with Ethereum at scale with low fees and faster transactions. The way the team got me excited was through portal.arbitrum.io. So my call to action to you is to get started by visiting portal.arbitrum.io. Go experience on-chain like it was meant to be. For a lot of Empire listeners, your crypto is not just another number on a screen. It's part of your future. I know Santi and myself feel that way. Our security sponsor of this episode, Harpie, takes this responsibility seriously and is the only wallet security tool that shields users from both on-chain threats and sneaky off-chain signature attacks. If you've ever been in that situation where you're moving quickly, you approve something on-chain, you realize that the address might be a dubious address, or you're really hoping that you could take that back, Harpie has you covered. Harpie can redirect your assets to your self-custodied vault, ensuring they remain completely under your control, safe and sound. With Harpie's always-on monitoring, you're not just detecting threats, you're actively blocking and recovering compromised assets from malicious transactions before they can even confirm on-chain. Harpie is the only wallet security solution that protected 100% of its users from attacks like the Ledger one in Q4, which was an off-chain signature attack. So if you're serious about protecting your crypto investments, it's time to make the switch. Secure your wallet for free at harpie.io/empire. That's Harpie, HARPIE.io/empire. If you want it to be even easier, just click the link in the show notes. It's interesting. I'm actually thinking about this in relationship to Blockworks' strategy. So take one thing at Blockworks. We have a conference that we host with the guys at Bankless called Permissionless, and we sell tickets. And the way that we might sell a ticket today is, well, we build a big audience on Twitter, and then we will post a link to our page on Twitter. Someone has to click the event page. Then they go into our event page, and they then click another button that links them out to Universe. And Universe has embedded Stripe, where that user can then buy the ticket. And with Frames, we could theoretically just set up a wallet and post, say, buy a ticket to Permissionless, and you can, as a user, on following Blockworks on Farcaster, you can literally just buy that ticket in one click right there.
Yeah, and the ticket could be an NFT on Zora, right? Like it literally could be like mint this NFT on Zora, and pay $5 for it, and that's your ticket, and you're just hitting the mint button in the feed, so you're promoting it right there. And yeah, as Antonio was saying, like if you do that, probably the conversion is going to be like a lot higher. You're going to sell out way faster. Because there's way less friction.
Or you could offer 10% off the ticket if you recast it before buying it, for example, and suddenly you have viral growth and everyone's resharing it to get 10% off the conference fee, right? Like you can enable that sort of virality. Like the social distribution record becomes, people are already doing it. It's slightly spamming. It's like, recast before you can mint, because that's all public data that you can actually use and embed into the functionality. So yeah, that's the whole natural referral mechanism. I can post a thing and get a kickback. Think of the ads implications for this for a moment, right? That like everyone who has a channel is going to have their own personal ad network. They share a link, it goes to a thing. They actually get paid if somebody converts. It's you can see the flywheel.
Yeah, actually, that basically leads to this domino of what I was trying to get at, I think, with like Packy's post, which is like far off. Like what is this? What happens next and then next and then next is like, I guess you could imagine a world where like you could set up this headless smart contract that's triggered by like I don't know, all these different apps. You have things that you play with all these different apps, and if a user does something on Warpcast, then they have, or someone has I'm making this up on the fly. Someone has 1,000 followers on Warpcast, and they make a trade on Uniswap. Then on OpenSea, this NFT actually unlocks for them or something. I'm making this up on the fly, but
totally. That and that's like, I think that's like what you're describing. That's composability, is if this then that, right? Like, and there's whole platforms. There's if this then that is a platform that takes a bunch of APIs from Web 2 companies and lets you compose these recipes, right, to do stuff like that. But it's super hard because you have like 3 different APIs that are kind of different, like hard to learn and interact with, and the user data is siloed between all those apps, and that's why these things in Web 2 just never got that big. But in Web 3, all this stuff is on blockchain. It's very easy to remix all this together. All the data is open. You don't have to trust anyone, right? So all this stuff is possible. And yeah, I think what Packy was getting at is basically when you have an internet that's entirely composable in a permissionless way, the limit is just like imagination, right? It's like what will developers do with all this open data, all these composable sort of APIs that you don't have to ask anyone permission to use. The limit just becomes imagination, and that's why it goes from looking like a toy to being to changing the world. Is like developers will just come up with really impressive stuff to do with it.
Yeah. Jesse, how do you think about what's happening with frames and headless marketplaces in light of Joel Monegro's 2017 or 2016 post, if you remember that, which was the VAT protocol thesis?
Yeah, it's something we've been talking about internally as a team. Is where's the value going to be in this ecosystem, right? And
what's the value of that, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a good question. So I think that so Joel's piece basically makes the argument that apps are going to be really thin layers, right, on top of these very valuable protocols where all of the state is. I think this was a reaction to Web 2, where apps like Facebook are incredibly valuable companies, whereas protocols that they're built on top of capture no value, right? The protocols are thin in Web 2 and the apps are fat. So his argument is Web 3 inverts that. I think I generally agree with Joel that Web 3 protocols can be fat and can capture value. Where I'd say like my thinking has evolved since he wrote that post is I don't know that apps are necessarily thin. I think you can have apps that capture value too. And in other words, it's not necessarily a zero-sum game. Maybe a good example, which is not related to Farcaster and Frames specifically, but I'll come back to those in a minute. A good example is Uniswap, and Uniswap, the protocol, tons of liquidity trades there, right? Today there's fees that are going to LPs, and there's a fee switch that may get turned on. And the protocol is just creating a ton of value for developers that integrate it. Like lots of people have already integrated Uniswap into Frames, MetaMask and Phantom have integrated Uniswap into the wallet, right? So the protocol is creating a ton of value for developers that are integrating it. And because they're creating this value, my view is, they can step into some of the flow of that value that they're creating. And they do that with the fees that are given to LPs today. On top of Uniswap, there's these apps that I just mentioned, MetaMask, there's Uniswap Labs. They're all charging fees at the app layer too. And so, they're monetizing their businesses, and those businesses are sustainable. It may be the case that these businesses are not as big as Web 2 businesses were because there's more of them. There's more competition. And that's what I think Joel was getting at, right? Is that the application layer gets thinned out a little bit, and the protocols that underlie the applications end up being really big because there's a whole ecosystem built around them. So I think that generally holds true. And in the Farcaster ecosystem, you have Warpcast as one client, one app, and that app is generating lots of data down to the protocol. There's already an ecosystem of third-party applications building on top of Farcaster. I think the data in the Farcaster network is very valuable. I'm sure Antonio is mining it, to get insights and that advertisers might be interested in, for example. And so that to me makes it obvious the Farcaster protocol is incredibly valuable and probably only increase in value. But the apps are monetizing too. And Warpcast is already, they're selling warps, the in-app currency Antonio mentioned earlier, right? So I think there's opportunity for value at both the protocol and the application layer.
Yeah. It's going to be so interesting to see what happens in the consumer. So I have two friends who started a sports betting company, and the differentiation is that it's it's got a social feed inside of it, and you can see okay, Jesse's betting on the Rams tonight. Okay, I'm betting on this basketball game. Oh, Jesse's up big tonight. It's all very social. I love my friends and I love this company. That is not the future though. The future is sports betting inside of where your social feed already is. I think inside of these frames or X number of other.
Yeah. Well, it's like Twitter surveys. Imagine you replace Twitter surveys with prediction markets instead of people just voting with their with a checkbox. You can vote with money because the money's already in your wallet, and you just do that in the same sort of form factor that Twitter presents a survey to you. You can just bet $5 on the outcome and do that seamlessly.
Yeah. And Antonio, I see you must love this because the affiliate it makes the funnel so damn tight. So yeah.
Yeah, although it still leaves open questions of what is the native business model of it? Who's the refer? If someone refers a user that you already have, how much of it? It's an interesting attribution problem, right? Of who actually drove that transaction, and it's all very TBD, and there's no playbook, and no one's figured.
Well, I think here. Let me posit an idea of how this might play out, and Antonio, I'm curious if you'd agree, or maybe there's some historical precedent that's going to undermine this idea, but I can imagine a world where clients like Warpcast demand that Frames give them some kind of, Frames that third-party developers are build in some kind of kickback to the interface layer for any transaction that happens through the Warpcast client, right? So if you're minting an NFT, for example, right, through Warpcast, a client on top of Farcaster, and you're paying $5, maybe Warpcast gets $1 or something like that. And if you don't give them that kickback, they're not going to show your frame.
Yeah. So as one comment on the Warpcast thing, it costs money to use Farcaster, by the way, right? Like Dan is starting to subsidize user growth. So signups in something like 15 or so countries are free, but by default, I forget what it is. It's $20 or $30. You have to pay for storage and the protocol fee. So it costs money to use Farcaster, which obviously is a break to adoption. But you can imagine a free version of Warpcast in which actually the advertiser, the person who's putting commercial content on there, has to give a kickback. That's another thing, by the way, the blockchain makes easy. More than one person can get paid, right? You can pay the actual publisher of the app. You can pay the referrer who referred the person. You can actually pay the user a kickback or a rebate for using the thing, right? Money, with programmable money, you have lots more interesting business models, which is not how it worked in Web2.
Not only more interesting business models, you just have optionality for the first time in what feels like 10 years. There's no optionality anymore in Twitter and Facebook and all these platforms. So that's very cool.
Yeah. One thing that's I think important to talk about with regard to frames. Obviously we're excited. The community is excited about them. But frames are they are a new distribution channel. They're not a product in and of themselves, right? It's a way to bring your product to market. So I think Dan tweeted something to this effect, and it resonated with me. And that is you still have to have a product that people want, right? And Frames is just a
of
new
course.
way to bring products to market
It's
and
the
get
place you meet
distribution.
your users. It's the place. It's
Right.
like you're starting a cookie brand, like it used to be. Do you want to sell these things on Instagram or open a retail store, or do you want to go door to door? Like
Mhm.
another option for the marketer or for the founder or whatever is, let's
Right.
build something big on Warpcast and go direct.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So you still need a product people want, but I think the thing that's kind of important to tease out is that the types of products that people might want might change because of the form factor of the new distribution channel, right? So the fact that you can ship the product right into a social feed, does that change the design space of what kind of products you build? Because the destination is a social feed, right? So like the prediction market example, right? Like, today, if you go to Polymarket or any of the prediction markets, most of them, they kind of look like, exchanges, like they're like kind of pro trader interfaces, with charts and stuff like that. If you're shipping a prediction market into a social feed, it probably looks totally different, right? It's like, because you want to take advantage of the fact that it's happening in a social feed. So that's, I think, the flip side is you have to build the product people want, but also the types of products you might build that people might want change because the distribution is social first.
How easy is it? That's a really good point about that. Yeah, it's kind of like how like Instagram and Facebook and stuff changed the fashion industry by pushing it towards fast fashion, and folks like Zara like came out of that. So,
Mhm.
how easy is it to build one of these? Like Blockworks. Blockworks is built on Web 2 rails, like WordPress, and like we've got our web, like we're not built on Ethereum. We're like a Web 2 company basically, and operating in crypto. How easy is it for someone like us to do something like this?
Well, important to note, like Frames didn't exist even a week ago. I think they launched last Friday,
Yeah.
and we hosted a hackathon in our office on Sunday. So certainly like the tooling is nascent, right? And it's getting built out pretty fast. But as I'm unaware of like a Frames builder. I saw a request for a frame that basically is like a WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get builder. So you can like make it super easy to build a frame. That will happen, I'm sure. Like within, it probably already exists already. So it's going to get super easy to build these things.
Yeah. That's cool.
And
I want like a Squarespace for frames.
We built one. Zach, the local Zoomer, has built a WYSIWYG frames editor. It's actually quite easy. And again, all the weird open graph stuff is embedded in the website, so it just looks like a website. Again, this isn't weird. Like when you go to Warpcast, it's not like where's the frames button. You just share the link, and the frame kind of happens, right? Because when it gets loaded in the feed, it goes and reads the page, gets the OG tags, and says, "Oh shit, this is a frame." By the way, expose this button, expose this action. Then I go press the button, I sign the message, it goes, and so there is kind of this back and forth between the sort of frame server. I'm sure if this takes off and becomes the way to distribute product, there's going to be a whole frames as a service industry of people who do nothing but like Frameify your website.
Here come the Wixes, the Squarespaces.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Oh, there's going to be a WordPress plugin to Frameify the whole thing. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. That's super cool. Okay. How does this change the importance of brand? So if you can do everything everywhere, brand, in my mind, becomes 10 times more important. But I'd be curious how you guys think of this.
I mean,
or actually, brand. I'm going to let you guys. I'm not actually sure where I stand on. You guys go first, and then I'm going to come up with my.
When you say brand, what do you mean? Do you mean like social capital and trust, or do you mean like Burberry and BMW? Like, what do you mean by brand?
Well, like Airbnb versus VRBO. Like Airbnb has a stronger brand, so more people go to Airbnb's website. But now, if it's just embedded inside of a little frame, like it's less about. Okay, I'm sticking with this Airbnb idea. Like people won't go to Airbnb.com anymore. They will be. Antonio has a house, and he's selling it he's renting it out on Airbnb. It's going to be oftentimes through Antonio's distribution, or Antonio's like Farcaster or Twitter, or whatever you want to call it. So the brand of Airbnb is less important. The brand of Antonio has gotten even more important than it already is today.
Yeah, I think questions of trust is interesting, right? Because in this trustless environment, what that means is actually, in some sense, there's more trust, right? In the sense that there's not implicit trust between X and Y, but you have to know who you're transacting with, right? And it will be a little scary. I mean, we're all being Frames fanboys, but it's a little weird to like click on a thing and do an on-chain transaction through somebody serving a thing through a frame that you don't necessarily have a first-party relationship with, at least not initially.
Right.
That's going to be a little iffy, right? There's going to be some wallet drain attack or some weird shit that happens there, which is always true. Every new technology has some level of scamming. That's just the way it is. And you're going to not do that unless you actually trust either the person showing you the frame or the who's enabling the frame.
Right. Well, I think the trust there is going to come from whatever interface that you're using. Just like Warpcasts are like filtering out spammy posts, right? Like they're going to filter out spammy frames too. And we have a portfolio company, Blockade, that's like laser focused on on-chain security, and they're already all over frames and like trying to make sure that like that frames can be easily safe at for end users. On the question of brand, like my take on brand is, I think maybe there's an unsatisfying answer. I think like on the one hand, strong brands, like they will benefit from frames because it's a new way to get the brand out there and just reach your audience. And if people already love your brand, like they're going to interact with it, where they already are. And that's, goes to what we were saying earlier, like you reduce the friction, you're going to just have higher conversion. And if you have a strong brand, like that people already love, people are just going to engage with it more. But then the flip side is that I can also see it sort of frames commoditizing certain types of brands, maybe ones that are like less coveted or premium, because the whole headless marketplace concept, right? Like you don't need to go to a third-party destination that you already know. You don't need to think of Airbnb and type in the website. You can instead just access the marketplace where you can say, you could type in, I want to like rent a house, and it can just show you the liquidity from the marketplace. You don't know that it's aggregating that liquidity from 3 different sites, from Airbnb, from Vrbo, and just giving you the results, where you already are, right? So I think it can commoditize brands that aren't premium, that like people don't care as much about the brand quality, right? And they just want the liquidity. It's like flights and stuff like that. You don't really care about the airline that much, right? So aggregators play a role, and frames could be like a channel for aggregation.
Super interesting. I want to maybe end with Jesse, your guys' thesis of the ownership economy and how that's evolved over the last couple of years, and how headless marketplaces, if at all, ties into this. But anything else on frames or Farcaster or Antonio? Anything we missed from you about any of this? Or
no, I'm glad we have a name for it. Headless Marketplace. It's been irking me that you definitely put your finger on something that is like, it kind of doesn't exist in Web 2, and it exists everywhere in Web 3. And I'm glad we have a kind of a name for it. So thanks for that.
It's definitely better than better platform integration. So
yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to shout out Bountycaster. As I should have mentioned them earlier as an inspiration for this. So Bountycaster is Linda Shea, and she's the founder there. And so very early, Linda's a very early user of Farcaster, and is building this marketplace. It's a bounties marketplace. So developer and talent, you can post $100 to go build this thing for me, and you post it on Farcaster, tag the bounty bot. And someone can go and claim that bounty, and because both of your handles are also crypto addresses, like the money can just flow right through Farcaster to the end user. So this was actually a big inspiration for me in thinking about headless marketplaces, because Linda literally built one and probably the first one on the Farcaster protocol, where you could end to end sort of post a bounty, be the solver for a bounty, and never leave the Farcaster experience that you're in, which is mainly Warpcast. So that was a huge inspiration and aha moment for me. And I just wanted to shout her out that, she obviously saw this way earlier than I did. And anyway, because she's building one of these things, and has been for a minute now.
Shout out Linda. How does this tie into your guys' ownership economy thesis, which when I think of Variant has been at the backbone of Variant since you guys started?
Yeah, I mean, it was our founding thesis. I think, so the key, what is the ownership economy? It's the idea that, next generation of internet products and services are going to make ownership the keystone of new user experiences. Okay, that's pretty broad. What does that mean in practice? I think ownership can manifest in a number of different ways. Like the most obvious one to anyone in crypto is you can own you can own crypto, you can own, a piece of the internet in the form of an NFT, right? Tokens, right? Token ownership is a net new thing that crypto enables. And we've already got, a lot of net new user experiences where that, the token ownership is an unlock for new user experiences. So like, owning some digital gold, owning, an NFT, a JPEG on the internet, being part of a community of other people who own that JPEG. These are kind of new user experiences enabled by digital ownership. But I think it's broader than just token ownership. So, we talked today about how your crypto wallet is not just where your money is, but it's also where your identity and your data lives. And that's another form of ownership. In the past, you've relied on third-party platforms for your identity, and they store your data. And you don't own it; they can take it away from you, deplatform you, and so on. So I think with Farcaster and Frames, we're starting to see the utility of owning your identity, your money, and your data. And that utility is, well, people can build new user experiences that come to you, right, in the form of headless marketplaces. So that's how it ties in with this idea that ownership is going to be the keystone of all these new user experiences. It spans, people owning a piece of the products and services they use every day in the form of tokens, all the way to, people being able to engage with new headless marketplaces because they own their identity, their money, and their data. And so it all fits under this umbrella, and that's why the thesis is kind of intentionally broad, because we think this is like a really expansive design space.
Nice, cool.
As one comment on that, I'll plug Chris's book again, right? It's called Read, Write, Own for a reason, right? And the reason why he titles it that is that Web 1 is about reading stuff, blogs. 2 is writing, I tweet, I cast, and then Web 3 is about owning, which owning isn't that new. I mean, there's been the notion of virtual ownership when it comes to IP and copyright for a long time, right? But like I've always thought of the blockchain as like a piece of technology from 2050 that dropped into the 2020s, right? In a fully virtualized world in which everything is digital, how do you own a thing? How do you sell a thing and own it like you own a house, or like I own this iPhone? Well, it's kind of hard to do actually at any scalable way. Like when did you digitally own anything as like an average everyday user before Web3? Well, you kind of didn't, right? Like maybe I owned the IP to Chaos Monkeys, or if Jesse founded a company, he partially owns the IP in the company, but common digital ownership of digital goods was kind of strange and unheard of. And it's not something that was typically, it's not securitized exactly, but put it in a way that you can actually sort of get your very little hands on it. And that's what Web3 is about. It's like in a world in which we spend our lives in digital representation, pixels that we're staring at right now, more than like the real world. How do you own that? I mean, what are NFTs, but kind of enforcing rarity, right? And saying, well, this is like the rare ape who does whatever. And before anyone laughs at the ape thing, long story short, I was shopping for a diamond a couple weeks ago and sitting there looking at the 4 Cs, and it was like shopping for like a Bored Ape, right? Like diamonds are worth nothing. It's all like a scam, right? But if the clarity score is H1 instead of S1, then it's like $500 more a carat.
I thought this looking for a watch the other day. I was like, I'm NFT shopping right now. Yeah.
Right. Watches are physical NFTs basically, right? It's like the blockchain is just taking it to the digital realm. Things that have existed in kind of various nascent form in other markets.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Jesse.
No, I was gonna say, I worked with Chris and Andreessen, and the first A16Z crypto fund was launched 2018, and Chris had at that time this amazing post, "Why Decentralization Matters," right? And I think for anyone who's thinking about picking up Read, Write, Own, his book, go read that blog post first. It really explains, why decentralization matters, and what he talks about there and in the book is permissionless interoperability, permissionless composability, these things that we had on the open internet that we no longer have today until Web3. I think there's these competing like ways to think about crypto. One is blockchains as a new kind of computer that enable this like permissionless interop, and the other is ownership. The synthesis is that they're very closely interrelated. Like the owner, and I've obviously always gravitated towards ownership as the thing that matters for end users, because it creates new user experiences, and the permissionlessness is what matters for developers. And so anyway, just wanted to again plug Chris, and like it goes way back to that old blog post, and would recommend that too.
Nice.
Yeah, that book is like, if you want to explain to your dad or your partner or whatever, like, what is this crypto stuff about? And I think that was, I've talked to Chris, that was his aim. Like, this is the book you want to buy, or your congressman potentially. Like, what is this crypto thing about? It
Just
explains
flood
it at that
Capitol
level.
Hill with a read write down.
I suspect they are.
Yeah. I'm sure Andreessen's well ahead of that. So, anyways, Jesse, Antonio, thank you guys for coming on. If folks are raising right now, I'd really recommend checking out Variant. They do a lot of early state, pre-seed, seed, Series A investing. And if they're marketers listening to this, spindle.xyz would highly recommend getting in touch with Antonio. So, yeah, Jesse, Antonio, thank you guys for coming on.
Thanks
for having us.
Hey everyone, Jason here. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. Wanted to take a quick second to thank today's title sponsor, Arbitrum. We know you are tired of on-chain experiences that have unaffordable fees and frustrating transaction speeds, and that's why we partnered with Arbitrum. You can experience frictionless trades, lightning speed, and lag-free transactions, all for pennies per transaction. Explore Arbitrum's expanding ecosystem at portal.arbitrum.io. That's portal.arbitrum.io. See you for the next episode. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's episode. Really hope you enjoyed it. We wanted to take a second to just remind you about our upcoming Digital Asset Summit in London, March 18th to 20th. Santi and I got your back. Seats are limited. If you heard it earlier in the podcast, there's a little competition running at Blockworks to see who can drive the most number of tickets. So when you register for the Digital Asset Summit, make sure you use our code. See you in London.